Yeah, so we should probably make an announcement. Not everybody knows, I guess. So Dan is actually ending. He ended his 22 years with IBM at end of December, and he's joining a new start. Well, I shouldn't say new. It's actually cash flow positive startup called Digital.ai. So great opportunity for him. He said that he may be a Istio customer. So given the TOC seats, stay with the person. We should give him the opportunity to continue participate. And I think his time, over time, he would be able to tell us, whether he has bandwidth for us or not.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. You're giving vendors here new prospect to pitch. Thank you.
I know Martin did that too when he first joined Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly.
He tried to stay on. I think after 2 or 3 months, he said, "This is it. I can't do it."
Okay, but let's assume he's not showing up today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through our weekly routine. I already clicked record.
Yay.
Awesome. So, community testing sheet, the test case has been prioritized by all the working group leads. So thanks for working on it. There was another request to pick 3 test cases by each working group. 2 of the working group have already done that. The asynchronous testing is starting next week. So it's a request for the remaining working groups to please pick at least 2 to 3 docs which needs automation, and if you can please automate that during this cycle. Then the 4th one is going back to that features.
So, hold on a second before we keep going. Do we have a user experience working group lead here?
Yes.
Yes. What's up?
Yes. Can you guys, by next TOC, pick the test cases to automate?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, and environments, we have someone from environments here?
Yeah, we'll try to find something.
Okay, by next week.
Yep.
And then networking?
Yep.
Yes, okay. And finally, security. Is anyone from security online? Do we have... I don't see anyone actually. Okay, we'll have to follow up with security folks and make sure they...
And sorry, it says 3 test cases. Are we automating doc testing? What are we automating?
Docs.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So we're trying to make sure that we continually reduce the toil that's required for each release by automating.
Yeah, that's right. Pay off the mortgage. We'll eventually get there.
So doc tests or manual tests? I thought it's manual tests.
So anything that currently has to be done manually.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. Pick the top 3 things that are currently manual that would be better to be automated. Okay, all right, go ahead, Shweta.
Awesome, Sven. Thank you so much. On the same line, there are at least 1 or 2 working group leads which were missing from the working group leads meeting. So it's a request that at least 1 of the working group lead please be available during the working group leads meeting. Okay, so the next one is
sorry for that. Any chance we can move the meeting? It's impossible for me to make 10 on Tuesday.
Okay.
Or I mean, again, I can make half an hour, but it's a meeting I cannot skip.
Okay. Let's work offline because I want to make sure all the working group leads are available on a new timing. That way everyone is comfortable. So let's work offline. Thanks, Costin. The next one is features planned for Istio 2021. So this, since I keep on hearing the Istio 2021 roadmap is going to be stability, there are certain features which are either missing or do not represent the correct state. So please make sure that you review this list and bring back the information on the features which are missing from this page or are stale or are missing from this page.
A quick question here, Shweta. And so is this exercise of trying to do like a yearly roadmap actually helpful? Just given how often we change things and then we have to do this quarterly thing, at least for the projects that I have been part of and I have done some sort of product roadmap, if it changes a lot, having a 1 year detailed vision is just an exercise in vain. And you never look at it again. I just wanted to get the feedback from you and whoever else participated. Like, has this been helpful? And if so, we should continue. If not, we should see how we can do it differently, where it is a low effort for everyone.
I will like to hear the working group lead's thoughts on it and the TOC's thoughts on it, right? That way we can make the right course of action.
Yeah, so I'll chime in. I think it's definitely helpful. A lot of users are wondering and asking. And so last year we published a roadmap blog. It was received really well. Certainly, like you said, not everything may be able to stay on, but at least you actually able to publish something that's significant. If you look at a lot of projects, they actually publish their short-term roadmap. And also, IstioCon is coming, so there's going to be a roadmap discussion at IstioCon. So this would also help us to prep for that as well, because we're going to need that for IstioCon, which is in February anyway.
I see. Anyone else who has done this exercise, found it useful? I think John raised his hand.
John has a
My
hand
hand
up.
was actually for a previous topic, but I can comment on this too. I think when I looked at the 2020 roadmap, a lot of it just didn't really make sense to me. Like, we had a bunch of stuff like Zookeeper support and like Azure functions or something. I have never heard anyone mention those outside of the roadmap. But things like high level stuff, like we want to focus on WASM. I think that's both obvious to probably everyone here, but could be useful to someone that's not following all their working group meetings. But if we try and go too low level in the details, then it probably gets just way too far off. Like, we know where we want to focus on WASM. We know we want to focus on, convergence with Kubernetes, and I don't know, other, broad strokes like that, which could be useful, I suppose.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think broad strokes and the level of resolution, especially if you go 6 to 9 months out, having vaguer and vaguer items there or higher level items will help, because they are likely going to change. So is that what we're doing, Shweta? Or because currently the rows are very detailed. That's why I was asking this question.
So Neeraj, you are absolutely right. I'll tell you what happened last year. Last year, I joined in January. I helped create this roadmap. The gap was we never went back every quarter and review that, what has been done, what has been changed. So that has been a gap, right? Every working group lead has done a great job in bringing the representation and the visibility, but as he said, the gap was not reviewing it every quarter. However, as Lynn mentioned, that has been very helpful to have a 1 year roadmap published, because people look at Istio, right? They want to see what is coming along. However, with any product, you cannot imagine that it has to be a setting stone. None of the roadmap I have worked in the past is actually not even like committed after a quarter. Even the second was a little flaky from that angle, right? I share your thoughts on having a little detail and more granular. We should bring it one level up. And I think that is something we can do and represent for 1 year, however, keeping in mind that this is going to change every quarter.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense, Neeraj?
Yeah, it does. Like, I mean, that's how we do it, right? If it is
Okay.
6 months out, it's less resolution. 2 years out, even less. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just make sure, what we publish in the last year, it's only high level. It's not saying detail as far as this particular spreadsheet. I don't think we are actively exposing the detail level of spreadsheet to our user. So it could be perceived a little bit less valuable than the higher level strokes that Neeraj is talking here. I think those are the things people are more looking from us to have.
Yeah, so basically, Shweta, then are you going to tease the high level items out and then create a blog and also use that in IstioCon? Is
So
that what you're thinking?
Yeah, let's do this. If you go into the agenda item, I have asked the guidance from the TOC on the themes, right? Yeah, so there's a Istio 2020 roadmap themes. I'm looking for guidance from the TOC. If we can get that high level guidance on, I'm not looking beyond 4 themes, so that
So
all the working group leads can align their. Sorry, go ahead, Swain.
I was going to say let's not dive deep into this yet because
Okay.
it's pretty far down. So let's wait till we get to it. Then let's keep following up on that. I think the request will be to the working group leads to help fill this out, but let's discuss it and then we can come back to that.
Okay, I think then the right set of template. Let's discuss all of that. I think that will be helpful even for the working group leads to have that guidance.
Okay.
Okay. Now, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm not touching the future reminder right now because that is still under review. For the achievements, thanks to Jacob who actually had put through this banner. However, there is a question if this is what it was intended, because we wanted to put up the banner for all the platforms which are not getting tested, or should we just remove the platforms which are not getting tested or move it to some other place in the Istio website? So if you can bring up that, thank you, Swain.
Whoa.
Are you still?
Maybe I click stop instead of present. I don't know. Try this again. There we go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the discussion was that the banner is not what we want it to be. And yeah, this stuff is like, it shouldn't say stuff about Istio community testing days.
Yeah, it's too verbose. Sorry,
Yeah.
Jacob.
Well,
Can we just have?
Go ahead, Niraj.
I was just going to say, can we have like 2 sections here, Swen, under platform setup? Maybe one which says, officially supported or tested, and the other one is pick a heading and put all of these links there instead of all of the pages individually having mode warnings. Does that work?
Like having a vendor specific section, or just, I guess a lot of these are vendor, but
yeah, I mean untested platforms, or I don't know, unsupported platforms. I mean, I'm struggling to come up with a good word for it because it's open source.
Yeah.
But basically, just have like 2 high level pages on the left, and then sub pages. If that helps.
Okay, so apparently we need to move this to. That should have been on the agenda, not the achievements.
But so some background information. I think we did discuss this in one of the work group meetings this year, and the consensus, which I actually thought from the TOC was at one point is, we want to show when was this particular page lastly being tested. Let's say Alibaba or Azure, it would say maybe Istio 1.1 was lastly tested. I guess maybe Jacob couldn't find any really it was tested.
Yes. Yeah. So I went through the spreadsheets for, I think, 1.1 on, and I could not find any reference to this being tested. So I actually did include the header at the top. This page was last updated August 8th, 2018. So that was the most information that I could find. And as far as I'm hopeful that it was tested when, it was last updated during that time, but there was no indication that anybody other than the, PR submitter had done any testing on this platform.
And I would be surprised if it works as is after August 8, 2018, right?
Right.
Can we reach out to someone? Do we know who submitted this PR, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I can attempt to do that. It may be difficult too, but like GitHub, yeah, I can take a look maybe through GitHub, see if there's a way to reach out to the people who submitted these PRs.
Could we, like, as a short-term thing, could we change the banner to say something like, these instructions were last updated on August 8th, 2018. You know, we don't know if they still work.
Yeah.
They may not still be valid with the latest Istio release.
Yeah. So by the way,
guys,
Jacob,
can you?
you'd put the dates on there. August 8th.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the banner, put the date. So rather than talking about Istio community testing days, because that's meaningless, right? Like,
let me send you a text, Jacob. Yeah, go ahead, Edith.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Sorry.
I'm sorry. You can go. You can go. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's just one question is why are we not automated it in tests? Like if it's a doc, if we will know that this is an automated test and every time that we're doing a new version, there is an automation test that run and we know that it's working well or not.
Yeah, most
Would
of
it
our page edits are actually automated. This is the platform which we don't have access to Alibaba.
Yeah, it's really difficult to automate the platform once.
We could get an account for each. I mean, pay some money
Yeah.
to get an account on each, but it's usually
Exactly. Like for
just to
instance,
do it.
for us, we're running it on every cloud and we have an automation for every cloud to verify that, right? And then every time that there is a new version, we're just running the test and see what failed.
Yeah, I think goes back to, you know, whoever author or contribute this page, it seems more reasonable for them to think out the automation.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe we should put links to vendors, because if the vendor has something specific to Istio, they should have a page on their own site and do their testing and owning.
People do that, right? Carsten,
know.
you're absolutely right. Many have it, but I think we want to be good community members here. Somebody has done this work. We don't want to just remove it. Let's put the facts on the page succinctly, like Sven said, and then if we can reach out, we'll reach out. And if there is no traction, we'll have to at some point say, hey, maybe nuke the page. But I think putting the facts so that people, whoever go to them, see them and then proceed is a good start, right?
So the weird thing here is that these instructions are how to create a Kubernetes cluster on Alibaba Cloud.
Exactly.
There's nothing about Istio here.
Wow. I mean, is that the case for most of these?
Yeah, most of them are the same. Like at some point, some of them had custom steps you need for Istio, but I looked through some of these just now, and they're pretty much just, here's how you start a kind cluster. Like, that's not really,
Yeah, that's,
Well,
we should not be a how to create a Kubernetes cluster documentation.
so I know for some of them having, like, I will give you an example for COPS, because Istio by default only works with third-party projections, and there was a period in which it wasn't easy to find out those options. It is helpful to have this document. You can't find those settings after Googling for half an hour. I don't know if that's the case. Like there is some requirement in Istio which necessitates some of these setups. If not, then this looks like pure vendor platform setup to me.
Well, we should fix that. I mean, we should figure out why it doesn't work and try to fix it. Can we keep only the stuff that is different? I mean, go over the documentation and remove everything that is not, is just, I mean, if you need, it's hard to find what you described, Niraj, in the sea of instructions how to set up Kubernetes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think I would be okay to have the instructions as long as the current. So how about this? For people we know who are testing these platforms, we make them first citizen. For the ones who are not, like Niraj said, we put them all under something like unsupported or untested. So they will be like a third, second level citizen.
Unmaintained. Yeah, we'll do something which support has its own connotations, but I can go for it, do that approach.
But at the same time, we support all Kubernetes vendors. So if you run a Kubernetes on any platform, we should work. I mean, otherwise it's a bug. So why do we need to list all Kubernetes vendors?
So it's untested, I guess. So we do support as long as it's Kubernetes compliance, but it's up to whoever tested.
Yeah, and it's it's easier said than done. Like OpenShift is a Kubernetes compatible thing, but if you try to install Istio on OpenShift without the custom steps, it will take you days to weeks to understand it.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Jacob, I'll give you the text, and you can,
Okay.
when you submit the PR, make sure you include Sven and Lynn. How's that
Okay.
sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. The other thing was that I was trying to use the boilerplate like functionality. So I had tried to include the specific date in the warning, but then I was kind of instructed, like, please use a boilerplate, because otherwise it was just like copied and pasted like on different, Docker and like, the other ones. So that's fine. Let's just keep that in mind.
Got it. Do we want to reorganize this now, Sven and Lynn, or should we just leave it flat for now? The pages themselves.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if we want someone to go through these and figure out like how to clean them up. Just because ideally these would be, create your cluster. Like, here are the differences you need to do. Here are the things you need to think about when creating a cluster on environment X, platform X, if you want to install Istio, right? Like, here are the requirements, rather than just all the instructions, right? Like, we shouldn't have copies of how to install a cluster. It should be install it normally, but run this step instead of this other step or something. So someone would need to go through and figure out how to clean all those up. Alternatively, we could just say, hey, these are just the vendors own these, they decide what they want to put there, and we don't care. But then they'll just keep getting out of date.
Mm-hmm.
So how much do we care?
I don't care as long as there is good information in the top saying what's the state.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's I'm probably fine with that too. So let's do that first, and then, okay, do you want to split into two? Is that your other question?
I mean, looking at them, all of them are useless. Sorry. If the two sections, the one which is useful will have one, and so that's not a good look either. Yeah. I mean, there's no point in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's even the GK one's not that useful.
Yeah, I don't know about IBM Cloud. Probably Lynn will tell that if people use this page.
Tell you how to use a managed control plane.
No, it's actually just tell you how do you deploy IKS cluster and make sure your cluster is big enough. The one that I think is most useful is actually the OpenShift one, because I just went through it this week. What they did a nice job is they didn't tell you how to stand up OpenShift like you guys said. All they said is these are the additional things you need to do to get Istio working, get the sidecar injection working, get the CNI. So it was super Istio relevant.
Same with the COPS one, because I test that every release. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the OpenShift one, that's exactly what I was trying to say. It should be like the OpenShift one. So yes, one's good. So do we want to take the effort of trying to get the other ones into state that's similar to those? Can
we notify the authors of the other ones that we would like them to make this change and see how many actually do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. We could at least reach out.
Want to give it
Josh?
to me?
Yeah, I was like, I'll show you volunteering. Okay.
Is Kubernetes Gardener still a thing? Okay.
Is it Cloud Foundry related?
Thank you, Josh, for picking up that work. It's a very difficult work.
Okay, let's keep moving unless we want to keep discussing that one.
What happened to the discussion around the upgrade working group? Did that fall off the schedule? Because we didn't get to it last week. Should we promote it to this week so that we can discuss it then? Technically, it was first in line.
Where? Oh, wait, docs. Where was this?
The upgrade
Yeah.
working group. What happened to it?
Oh, it's the documentation work group.
No, the upgrade working group. I'm talking about the upgrade.
I think it's approved, no? Or
Yeah,
am
I
I?
thought we went through the charter. Jacob will present it.
Yeah, well, I told him I wanted to talk to Niraj because I had some concerns, but those have been cleared, so I am okay with it now. So if it's already been approved, that is consistent with what I think should happen. That's fine.
Okay, good.
All right, let's just make it official.
Okay.
I think I'm good with it. It looks like Josh, you're good with it. Len, you are too. Sven, do you have concerns?
No, sounds good to me.
All right, let's approve it. Thanks, Josh, for bringing it up.
I moved the action items up to the top, which they should have been. We talked about this in steering, and I think steering is going to follow up, so we can probably take these off of TOC. That sound right to other people in steering?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nate, on the feature versus field status.
Oh yeah, you can just open that doc real quick. So we kind of ran into this issue in our last sync.
And then it's going to kick me off again. Yep.
Yeah, I've been having that problem as well. If you try to share another tab, it just stops sharing. Okay.
Good feature.
I'm glad I'm not alone. Yeah. So
crappy meeting software.
Exactly.
Oh, it's recorded. I mean, this is great. Someone should fix that bug though.
Yeah, so we kind of ran into this. So we've been kind of like working at a very low level where we're dealing with, like, on a field by field basis, say annotations or labels or proto fields, how to assign what we've been calling feature status to them. However, we kind of ran into the issue. We've kind of brushed by it a couple times, but I think it's about time we actually address it. Like, we're not really dealing with feature status at this level. At least we don't feel like we are. We're dealing with one particular knob that might be a part of a greater feature. Calling it a feature status is kind of conflating and two things, and ultimately ends up being confusing during discussions. It's been confusing during our discussion. So so I've been proposing that we call this something different, be it field status or whatever we decide. However, that brings its own baggage because, you know, then we need yet another progression defined, a process for progressing individual fields through some sort of graduation process. The alternative is that we basically have we assume that we have one feature per field, and so that means that basically every single knob we call a feature. So that means we have this incredibly long list of features in Istio, and that's going to be, in my opinion, that's going to be hard to elevate to the user. Like, how is a user going to make sense of every single knob being a feature of Istio? I don't see a third option. Maybe there is one, but I kind of feel like those are our two paths to go with all this. If the granularity is per field, as we've been doing as we've been assuming so far, then I feel like these are the two options. But I'm just gonna leave that open for discussion.
So
yeah, go ahead.
If we take it a bit from a user point of view, in terms of how would a user use this, right? User sees an annotation, or are we talking mostly about annotations and labels here, or are you also talking about a field within a stable API, for example?
Any field in any one of our protos as well. So
okay.
Whether it be stable or what, it almost doesn't matter. Yeah.
I see. So you want to signal to the user that that particular subfield is different in maturity compared to the overall encompassing thing, right? That's one use case. The other use case in terms of annotations is this is the only way to know the maturity of that field because there is no outer housing to tell you, right?
Exactly. That's specifically true of labels and annotations, right? There's no greater context. I mean, one thing we could do is we could certainly link to the field, assuming that there's a one-to-one between field and feature that it controls, which I think is probably a fair assumption. Then we could certainly make a link to, hey, here's the feature, maybe a link to the website showing the feature status of the feature it's controlling. But that wouldn't tell you that this, oh, by the way, this is a new API and proceed at your own risk.
Yeah. So just taking this a little further, I was going along what Rob is chiming in the messages, right? So most of the time, if I'm using these fields, I am trying to use a new functionality or a feature, right? For the annotations and labels, at least, that's what it looks like to me. I'm toggling a functionality for a subfield. On an API, that's where I'm not sure how it works. Like for a stable feature within a particular API, can there be fields which you enable which are not stable or not beta?
I mean, I would assume that's true anytime you maybe change the configuration for something. You might say deprecate an old field in favor of a new field.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? Like that sort of stuff happens a lot. There's a little bit of API churn. Especially if it's not stable yet. But it might be like beta. But this new thing is experimental.
So
it's complicated.
I'm wondering here if we're going about this a little bit the wrong way.
That's my feeling.
If we forget about feature status for a second. So if we look at our reference for our APIs, right? We have APIs. Each resource has a maturity level, and then we're saying that's not fine-grained enough. We need to add per field maturity, right? So okay, so let's go ahead and document that, right? Let's annotate them, let's document them, and let's do the same on labels and annotations. So labels and annotations can have maturity, fields can have maturity. If the field is not labeled with maturity, it inherits whatever the outer maturity of the resource it's in. And so okay, that's all documented as part of our reference. So once we have that, what are we missing, right? Do we need this separate feature status thing at all? Do we just, right? How meaningful is that table that we have of, feature X?
Well, I mean, really, what we're talking about is saying API stability. We're not talking about the stability of the feature itself, right? So if let's say multi-cluster is a feature, right?
I'm saying how useful is multi-cluster as a separate feature? Do we need something outside of API level?
That's actually fair. That's actually fair.
I think so. I mean, if I'm doing multi-cluster and I have to dig through all the API reference, including the environment variables and annotations to understand the overall maturity of that feature, it's impossible.
Yeah, I agree. And it's possible, Sven, like you said, maybe that table could be somehow generated. I mean, instead of today, we maintain it manually, which I think the user likes it. We could potentially automatically generate that based on the feature status and the field status from the API repository.
So maybe, well, okay, so I think there's two things there. One is maybe it is useful, but it's not. It's not necessarily tied to individual API fields, right? It's the overall status.
Right, it's overall status. Go ahead.
When we've deprecated fields, it's been real handy to let users know that they're setting a value in those fields. And we had a request for 1.9 to let people know if they're using alpha fields in production. Same thing.
Right. So I think that's true. I think the question is whether the feature status table is useful, not whether per field. So I think we all agree that per field level maturity is a useful thing to do and provide information about. And the question is, how does that intersect with the table of feature status that we have documented?
I think in the short term, it doesn't need to, right? So until we have that automation which goes and says, this label belongs to this feature, and then I'm going to check the status of each of these fields and APIs and take the min, and that becomes the overall, the minimum value of whether it's alpha, beta, and that becomes the feature status. I think we are going to have both, and the higher level feature statuses are going to be manually done after they go through this promotion phase, right?
Is minimum correct, or in case
I don't know. You're right.
Okay.
Just give an example.
How about just removing anything that is alpha, because most users should not even see that if it's something that it's not stable. Why would they care? I mean, put it in a wiki or put it somewhere else, and just assume that everything we ship is usable in production, and everything that is not ready yet is not confusing users, because we don't want people to use alpha stuff.
Well, some of our users wants to use alpha to give us feedback.
Sure, but they can use the wikis, they can use, the documentation. The official documentation Istio should reflect things that the production user should use safely, not what a developer or someone who wants to experiment or to. I mean, it's one thing to have it in the doc comments, and some developer site or some place where people who want to experiment use. It's another thing to, if I'm a user of Istio, I go to the site and I get stuff that I can use, not.
I mean, let's take a Kubernetes as an example. I think I've seen their alpha feature on their website also, right? The stuff I'm worried about the wiki, I think the bar is super low, and it constantly changes.
Alpha is super low quality anyway. I mean, it's not, it's matching the feature status.
Yeah, but alpha, that means you have automated testing and you actually have documentation that goes through multiple approvals to be able to merge.
Yeah.
So okay, let's step back for a second. So Nate, what decision do you need from TOC here to move forward?
Well, so it sounds like we're going with the number one approach. That seems to be the consensus as far as I can gather. So we basically have an individual field status. So that's part of it. Okay, well, sounds like we don't have consensus on that.
Well, so I think I think that's true, that we're saying there is such a thing as field level maturity.
Yeah. Okay. API status.
If we have API status.
So forget status, we just have API status.
That's what I'm trying to say. Just have API status.
API status. Okay. So if we rename feature status to API status.
Well, I was gonna say, like, put feature status aside for a second.
Yeah. Is it the same enumeration that we currently have today for feature status? Experimental, alpha, beta, stable.
API status is the same type of maturity level, yes.
Okay, same maturity levels. And then we also have deprecated and retired.
Retired. Yep.
But I think we're going to track those separately, so that we actually have historic information of what the final API status was before it was deprecated or retired. Anyway, that's a detail we can talk about.
One important detail will be introduced at, because with the versions we have, we should have an indication that this field was introduced in a particular version. So if a user is using an older version, they know that the field is not there.
Yeah. So let's have that discussion separately. I don't disagree. But yeah, okay. So the enumeration is the same. We call it API status, and I guess the last thing is, do we need yet another process for graduating APIs, API fields, or what is the process? I guess.
Yeah, clearly we need a process.
Right.
It should be similar to, but lighter weight than graduating an entire API.
Yeah, that's my thought as well. I guess it sounds like the onus is on this little Tiger team to come up with that process.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I think that's all I need then. If we're all in agreement there, then we'll just move with that.
Yeah, and I think we can independently of that, we can figure out what to do about the feature status page and how it interacts with API status and how we want to manage it. And
right, and I'll leave that as a to do for some other team.
Yes. For now, let's keep the feature status page. I think that's my input.
Yeah, I just want to limit the scope of our little working group or whatever. Anyway, Mitch, Jason, anybody else that's working on this have any thoughts?
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
Great, thanks guys.
Thanks for all the work. It's been really helpful.
Sorry, I'm trying to take notes now. Oh, and I need to click the button to share this tab instead, which will kick me off. Cool. Okay. Okay. Mitch.
Yeah, so our config status has been in alpha since Istio 1.6. You may recall that part of the UX roadmap for Istio 1.9 was promoting that to beta and enabling it by default for Istio. And so as part of that process, I'd like to seek TOC approval for that. I've been following the Istio enhancements process for our beta launch checklist. The only checkboxes that are not checked at this point are either related to documentation, which I don't want to change until it's confirmed that it can be beta. I don't want to publish that it's beta if you guys aren't going to approve it. And certain test cases that will begin to be covered when this is enabled by default.
Was this already considered in a working group?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So the promotion to beta, was that already considered in a working group?
Yes, the UX working group owns this.
Okay, and already approved the promotion?
Yes.
Okay, should other working groups have an opinion on this?
I think this is where they're allowed to have an opinion.
Yeah.
Why he's bringing that.
Yeah. So I'll give it a positive. I was part of the review, supportability review panel, and also looked through the checklist as well.
Yeah, Mitch, I have some concerns about some of the things on the checklist. Like it says we have no major issues. That seems a bit of a stretch to me. Like if we look through the issues that are open about this, there's a bunch of really critical issues where there's a ton of memory leaks. We tried to turn this on by default in our CI, and we ended up seeing that all of our tests started failing because Pilot was crashing. As far as I know, those haven't been fixed. So I really wouldn't feel comfortable turning this on when we know that it crashes and has major memory leaks. So
you're right that it did have major issues. I've got an outstanding pull request that you and I have been working on since November 30th, John. It's ready to merge. All tests are passing. I've addressed all comments, and it fixes all known memory leaks in the future.
So I think it's one thing to have an open PR, but can we at least say that? So that we can say, once this is merged, we can track it, make sure it's fixed, and then we have nothing, rather than saying right now we have none. And we need to enable it in the CI, right? Because when we did that, we started seeing crashes.
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely not support promoting this feature to beta if for some reason that PR does not merge. that bug absolutely has to be fixed.
So multi-cluster works?
Yes, and CI tests for multi-cluster are enabled.
So Mitch, refresh my memory here. So this is not only analyze status, but this is also config distribution status, and which is what John is saying, that we want to make sure all the leaks are fixed so that it can run in CI and we are confident about it, right?
And,
correct.
And what
Okay.
what is the load testing status? I mean, that was the other concern we had in the past, where if you make a number of changes and you have a large cluster, it will impact or crash API server or have impact on scalability.
Yeah, so we've limited the number of requests this will make on the API server concurrently in such a way that the GKE and Kubernetes scalability SIGs signed off on our architecture, as well as it limits the impact on Istio. So we don't just like build up an indefinite go routine or an indefinite list. We're capped at how big this queue will become. So in cases where we get overloaded with, and it takes a lot to overload this system, but if we were to get overloaded with lots and lots of requests, the status would simply become more latent. Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding the word for that. Recent. Older. There we go. Older. Simple words.
So the stability stress test suite includes coverage for this feature is not checked, right? I think that's what is being asked here is.
Yes. So once this feature is enabled by default in Istio, which it has to be beta in order to do, it will be covered by the stability stress test suite. I have run through the stress test suite manually with this feature enabled, and it's stable.
Okay.
And that's the isotope stress test with the 3 namespaces of 20 pods each and only 1 instance of Istio.
So you want both beta and to make it default? I mean, can we at least let user opt in if they want this feature enabled? Because I don't think everyone. My concern is most people do not look at status and it's not something that is easy automatically. It's for debugging and understands there are other tools for debugging and I can live with having it beta, but having it on by default for everyone, even if people don't use it, doesn't seem reasonable.
So that's a little bit of a self-defeating argument. Right now, people aren't predominantly using this feature because it's not enabled by default and because it requires an install time parameter to enable.
Sure, but even in Kubernetes, I'm saying that I don't think it's a common pattern for people to look at status of different resources in most cases. I almost never do. And I don't know a lot of people that...
That's not true.
Yeah, we have a number of users who have specifically requested this feature. We have issues outstanding from multiple companies asking us to update status.
Sure, and they can turn it on. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, can we allow user to enable this on a namespace? Because I think I typically look at the status only when there's an issue.
On a namespace by namespace basis, it certainly doesn't support that today. I would need some time to consider whether that fits with the architecture of the feature.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little concerned here. Hang on. If the stress tests are done, if all the working group leads are happy with the performance implications, and it has done all the checklists for beta promotion, are we having a new gate for making it default now?
Yes.
Okay,
I mean,
what's that gate cost?
I mean, making a feature on by default, it's different than having a feature beta. We have a lot of features that are beta, but we do not have them. I mean, strict mode TLS is not on by default.
We're not supposed to turn alpha on by default.
No, but even for beta, I don't think we have a rule that if it's beta, it's on by default.
That's true.
It can be on by default. So it's
could
allowed.
Be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be, but not necessarily in a default profile.
Right.
It can be on in a separate profile, yes.
So what is the reason not to turn this on by default?
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, John just mentioned that he doesn't trust the checkboxes. So
me either. I can second John.
Yeah, but Costin, if it was like if the real downside of this is stability and performance, right?
Yep.
And so if it was stable and it was performant, then I don't see why it would be off by default.
I know.
Okay, so what do you guys need to see to make sure it's stable and performant?
More usage.
Well, the first thing is that the bug needs to be closed. Like that PR that's been open since November 30th needs to be
merged.
Then we can enable it by default in our CI systems. And that should, I think, prove out a lot about its stability and performance.
How about graduate to beta, leave it off by default one release, and then in a next release we can make it on by default. And that's a good process for everything that we are doing, because
I am actually not even convinced so far about beta, right? So what Mitch had said makes sense to me. Basically follow that, come back in a month, or however long it takes for you to get the PR and run the CI, and then we can talk over again, both whether it should be beta or not, and whether it should be on by default.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch, what I want to see is that basically everything's repeatable. So it's not you running the stability test. I want to make sure that that's in everyone's stability tests, and the PR needs to be merged, stuff like that.
But
I totally agree. But in order to enable it by default for all of these suites, it's supposed to be beta. I can't enable by default if it's alpha. Right?
I don't. Okay, so that should not be a requirement. You should be able to enable by default for internal testing. It's only if it's on by default for an external release that it needs to be beta or higher.
Okay, so we tend to test our releases internally, and that tends to be what we run into the perf test suite against, etc. Are you suggesting that we enable it by default for now and then disable it before the release if it doesn't pass the test?
Enable it for tests.
I'm not being that prescriptive. Basically, it needs to have automated tests, and we need to be. It needs to break something if there's an issue.
Yeah. Okay, so we have automated test coverage.
So, Mitch, what we're saying is get it enabled in the test suite, the stability test suite, as soon as possible to give it some soak time to make sure it's stable and performant.
Okay.
And assuming it passes those, we release with it as beta and not by default. And if it doesn't pass those, we keep it as alpha and we turn it back off by default.
Okay, that's fair.
Even after, I mean, I think for all features, the stages, you move to alpha, you move to beta, you leave it beta off by default, and then next release you move it on by default.
I'm sorry, we have never seen that.
We did it many times. It's not.
Sure. Again, I don't see if Mitch can do this by proving us running in CI. I don't see a reason to come up with a new process just yet.
Right. Exactly, Brian. Yeah. Beta means we think it can be on by default. That's what beta means.
Yeah, but.
Okay. So how long do we want this running in the perf suite before we're comfortable talking about it again? And do you want me to raise it again in the TOC, assuming it passes that gate?
Yeah, or send a note to TOC to approve offline.
Okay. And what kind of time frame are you looking for?
I mean, I think it should be passing for a couple weeks. Like if it's passing with no problems at all for a couple weeks, I'd feel pretty confident.
Question is 1.9 or 1.10. Effectively, if we backward to, I mean.
Right. So I think that if we turn it on by default for all the tests today, do we have enough time until 1.9 goes out to say, okay, leave it that way and it's fine, or we can have a last minute PR that says, okay, flip it back to off. So is there enough time? Is that?
I'm actually comfortable with saying it's beta in 1.9 and turning on by default in 1.10. I don't have a problem with that.
That's not what we're.
I know.
Right,
yeah.
Right. The most tractable, simple mechanism to actually do that is turn it on default by default today, or like to do it in test. But it's simpler to just turn it on by default today, and we can flip it back if it doesn't pass the pass all our gates by release date. And if it does pass, but it has to be deliberate. So the risk is it cannot just slip in and say, oh well, so it has to be deliberate.
Yeah, I think so. So how long do we have till release?
You have another mouse. So
yeah.
So I'm with if you get the PR in like today or next week, and then switch it on by default. And then if we make it to release day and it's no one's had any issues with it, let's release with it.
So can I jump in real quick because it may impact the discussion. So my concern wasn't only about the performance and stability. I believe, I mean, with data that would be fixed once this PR is merged, hopefully. But my bigger concern is back when we first did this alpha thing, we said that we were going to re-review the API because we didn't have like the normal design doc review. And we had some concerns around the actual API of the status message that we were writing. And I don't think any of those have been addressed. Specifically, we're still writing like distributed to 5 out of 5 proxies, which I feel like is not a API that we should be promoting. We also said that we wanted to get feedback from both Knative and from using it in our CI, like when we apply something, actually do a wait on it for our tests. But have those things happened?
Yeah, so this has been in CI testing since 1.6. The tests are part of the regular pre-submit gate. And Knative has been working on adopting this feature for about 3 months now. Actually, the bug that you and I are working on right now, John, that pull request is blocking their particular adoption.
Yeah, for the testing, I did not mean that testing of the feature. I mean using this in our tests. Like the whole point of the feature is so that users can deploy a virtual service and then wait for it and then do something, right? Which is what all of our tests do. That was kind of one of the motivations for the feature. But as far as I know, we're not actually doing that in our own tests. Like we're testing the feature in isolation, but we have hundreds of tests that apply config and send traffic.
The wait functionality is used actively in a number of docs tests. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I know we have 43 documents that are tested. I know of at least a handful that use the wait functionality.
So we're actually at time, and we had one topic we needed to cover today before we exit. I think the other thing John's calling out is that he doesn't think that this checkbox is actually correct. We should re-review the API. So maybe next to you. So let's get it on by default, but let's review the API again next week in TOC and or offline.
Yeah. Can you give us a link on the API and also the documentation on how to use this so we can actually get some hands-on ourselves? Also, I want to make sure we have a good story on disable this if we want to turn it on.
Yes, I can add all of that. I'll add a link to the supportability review, which has all of those links from it.
Yeah, Mitch, also, I want to say I just objected to it multiple times in a row, but I think it's really close. But I don't mean to just dismiss everything you've done.
Let's get it over the line, I think is what we're trying to say.
We definitely need this. Thank you, Mitch.
Right. It's a great feature. We should make sure it's right. So real quick, before we stop, I did want to talk about the 2020 roadmap thing that we said we'd get to later. So we don't have time to go into too many details, but Shweta and I and Louis were talking about this earlier this week. And we wanted to see if someone in TOC wanted to take the lead on kind of driving the overall themes for 2021 and the roadmap. We didn't want to take that by default. So if anyone else is interested, now's the time.
I can work with you or whoever is.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Who is going to work other than me? Or is it just one person, Shweta?
So someone needs to start. The idea was someone needs to start kind of a doc with the themes and kind of rough roadmap for 2021 that will be then input into a blog post and input into the IstioCon discussion. So if you want to start that, Niraj, then the rest of us will all help, obviously. But
yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Sounds good. Okay, so we'll with you offline.
Yep. Bye.
And then real quick, release 1.9 branches in tech. Anything other than announcement there on that one?
No, we're trying to get a beta build out by the end of today, but that's
a release candidate.
Yeah.
And question: when is the first testing day?
I'd have to look at the spreadsheet. Okay. I think it's in 2 weeks, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Shweta, do you know?
Sorry, what was the question?
When's the first community testing day for the 1.9 release?
18th, next Wednesday it's starting.
Okay, so I think that the branch has been cut. Changes should be minimal in the branch. If there need to be changes, strong preference to get them in before the testing day, the first testing day.
And I'll make one comment is that the automated testing is still running against all 1.8 builds. We still have 4 tests that are failing before we can turn the automated testing on the master branch or the new 1.9 branch. So there is no automated testing being done yet on this code.
That's very important.
Okay. Okay, are we good? Anything else we need?
It's really late here. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Have a good
Bye.
Thanks, you too.